The mountain trembled as Valdris, the oldest dragon in existence, collapsed onto the cold stone floor of his ancient cave. His scales, once brilliant emerald green, had faded to a dull gray over thousands of years. Each breath came harder than the last, and his golden eyes, which had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, began to lose their light. For 3,000 years, Valdris had lived in solitude high in the Thornspike Mountains. He remembered when the world was young, when magic flowed freely through every living thing, and when dragons soared through skies unchallenged. But those days had long passed. Humans had forgotten the old ways, building their cities of steel and glass, dismissing dragons as mere myths and fairy tales. The great dragon's body, stretching nearly 200 feet from snout to tail, shuddered with each labored breath. His treasure hoard, accumulated over millennia, lay scattered around him. Gold coins from empires that no longer existed, jewels that had once adorned the crowns of forgotten kings, and artifacts whose purposes had been lost to time. Yet none of these riches could buy him what he needed most, a reason to keep living. Valdris had watched his kind disappear one by one. Some fell to human dragon slayers in the Age of Nights. Others simply faded away, choosing to sleep eternally rather than witness the world change beyond recognition. He was the last, and, with his death, the Age of Dragons would truly end. As he lay there, memories flooded his ancient mind. He remembered teaching younger dragons to fly, their wings catching mountain winds for the first time. He remembered the great councils where dragon elders would gather to discuss the affairs of the world. Most painfully, he remembered Sirathan, his mate, whose silver scales had shimmered like moonlight. She had been gone for over 1,000 years, killed by humans who feared what they didn't understand. The loneliness had become unbearable. Dragons were not meant to live in isolation. They were social creatures, despite what human legends claimed. The weight of being the last of his kind pressed down on Valdris more heavily than the mountain above his cave. His breathing grew more shallow. The magic that had sustained him for so long was finally failing. Dragon magic was tied to purpose, to connection, to the belief that one's existence mattered. Without other dragons, without a role in the world, Valdris felt his life force ebbing away like water through cupped claws. Outside his cave, a fierce snowstorm raged. It was fitting, Valdris thought, that the world should be cold and harsh as the last dragon died. He had seen enough of beauty and wonder. Perhaps it was time for his story to end. Meanwhile, in the village of Thornhaven at the base of the mountain, 12-year-old Marcus Chun huddled in his family's small cottage. He was considered strange by the other villagers, a boy who preferred books to games, who asked questions that made adults uncomfortable, who claimed he could sometimes sense things others couldn't. Marcus had always felt different. While other children played warrior and princess, he sat by the window, staring up at the mountains and wondering what secrets they held. His grandmother, before she passed, used to tell him stories of the old days when magic was real and dragons flew overhead. Everyone else said she was just a superstitious old woman, but Marcus believed every word. That night, as the storm howled outside, Marcus felt a strange pull. It was like a voice calling to him, but not through his ears, through his very soul. He sat up in bed, his heart racing. The feeling grew stronger, more urgent, like someone crying out for help. He tried to ignore it, pulling his blanket over his head. But the sensation wouldn't leave him alone. It was pain, loneliness, and despair all mixed together, and somehow Marcus knew it was coming from the mountain. Without fully understanding why, Marcus dressed in his warmest clothes. He knew it was dangerous to go out in the storm, especially at night. His parents would be furious if they caught him. But something told him this was more important than staying safe, more important than following rules. He crept past his parents' room, grabbed his father's old hiking lantern, and slipped out into the storm. The wind immediately tried to knock him down, and snow stung his face like tiny needles. But the pull was stronger now, guiding him toward a path he'd never noticed before, though he'd lived in Thornhaven all his life. The path wound up the mountainside, sometimes disappearing under snowdrifts, but Marcus somehow always found it again. His hands grew numb with cold, and ice formed on his eyelashes, but he pressed on. The feeling grew stronger with each step, ancient, powerful, and desperately sad. After what felt like hours, but was probably less than one, Marcus saw a faint glow ahead. It came from a cave entrance he was certain hadn't been there before. The storm seemed less fierce here, as if the mountain itself was providing shelter. Marcus hesitated at the cave mouth. Every logical part of his mind screamed at him to turn back. But the pull was overwhelming now, and mixed with it was a sense of urgency that made his chest tight. Whatever was calling him was running out of time. He stepped into the cave, his lantern casting dancing shadows on walls that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. The passage went deep into the mountain, sloping downward. The air grew warmer as he descended, and he could hear something that sounded like labored breathing echoing off the stone. The passage opened into a vast chamber, and Marcus stopped in his tracks, his lantern slipping from nerveless fingers. It didn't matter. The chamber was lit by a soft, golden glow emanating from the creature that lay before him. It was a dragon, a real, living dragon, just like in his grandmother's stories. But this dragon was clearly dying. Its breathing was shallow and ragged, and its eyes were closed. The magnificent creature looked ancient beyond imagining, and Marcus could feel waves of sadness radiating from it. Without thinking, Marcus stepped forward. His foot knocked against something metallic, a golden goblet, and the sound echoed through the chamber. The dragon's eyes opened. For a moment, boy and dragon stared at each other. Marcus should have been terrified, but instead, he felt only wonder and an overwhelming need to help. The dragon's eyes held intelligence and depth he'd never seen in any creature before. They also held surprise. "You can see me?" The voice resonated not in Marcus's ears, but in his mind, weak but still carrying an echo of its former power. Marcus nodded, taking another step closer. "You're hurt," he said simply. "I am dying," Valdris replied, studying this strange human child who had somehow found his hidden cave, who could see through the concealment spells that should have made it invisible. "And you should not be here, young one. I am the last dragon, and when I die, magic dies with me." "Then, don't die," Marcus said with the simple logic of a child. Despite his pain, Valdris almost laughed. "If only it were that simple. I have lived too long, seen too much. My kind is gone. There is no place for dragons in your world anymore." Marcus approached slowly, his fear completely forgotten. Up close, he could see how the dragon's scales had lost their luster, how his breathing was labored. But he could also sense something else, a spark that hadn't quite gone out. "My grandmother told me about dragons," Marcus said. "She said you were noble and wise, that you protected the balance between magic and the mundane world. She said the world was lesser without you." "Your grandmother was wise," Valdris said, a note of sadness in his mental voice. "But she spoke of the past. The world has moved on." "Has it?" Marcus asked. He reached out tentatively, his small hand hovering inches from the dragon's snout. "I found you. I heard you calling. Maybe the world hasn't forgotten as much as you think." Valdris looked at the boy's outstretched hand. No human had tried to touch him in peace for over 1,000 years. The last had been a young woman who came seeking wisdom back when humans still believed. The memory was bittersweet. "I wasn't calling anyone," Valdris said softly. "But I heard you anyway," Marcus insisted. His hand still hovered in the air between them. "My grandmother said that in the old days, some humans and dragons were bonded, that they could share thoughts and feelings. She said the bonds made both stronger. Those days are long past," Valdris said, but something stirred in his ancient heart. This boy was different. He could sense it, a spark of the old magic that humans were supposed to have lost. "Maybe they don't have to be," Marcus said, very slowly, giving the dragon every chance to pull away, He lowered his hand until it rested on Valdris's snout. The moment their skin touched, the world exploded into light and color. Marcus gasped as images flooded his mind. Thousands of years of memories, the glory of dragons in flight, the pain of loss, the crushing weight of loneliness. But flowing the other direction was something else, the pure, untainted hope of a child who still believed in magic, who saw wonder where others saw only myth. Valdris's eyes widened. The connection was real, as strong as any he'd felt in the ancient days. This human boy carried the old blood, the gift that had once allowed humans and dragons to bond as partners. He had thought that bloodline extinct, but here was proof that magic still flowed through human veins, waiting to be awakened. The dragon felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: hope. It was small, fragile, like a candle flame in a vast darkness. But it was real. "What is your name, young one?" Valdris asked, his mental voice already stronger than before. "Marcus," the boy replied, his hand still resting on the dragon's scales. "Marcus Chun." "Well, Marcus Chun," Valdris said, and for the first time in 100 years, the ancient dragon's eyes held a glimmer of their old fire. "It seems the world has one more surprise for this old dragon after all." The golden glow in the chamber grew brighter, and Marcus could feel warmth flowing between them. It wasn't just physical heat, it was the warmth of connection, of finding someone who understood, of not being alone anymore. For both of them, it was like coming home after a long, cold journey. Outside, the storm began to calm, as if the mountain itself sensed that something momentous had just occurred. The last dragon had found a reason to live, and a young boy had discovered that magic was more than just stories. The transformation happened slowly at first. Each day, Marcus climbed the mountain path to visit Valdris, and with each visit, the ancient dragon grew a little stronger. The dull gray of his scales began to show hints of their former emerald brilliance. His breathing became less labored. Most remarkably, the golden fire in his eyes returned, growing brighter with each passing week. Marcus told no one about the dragon. He knew instinctively that the world wasn't ready for such knowledge. Instead, he made excuses, studying in a library, exploring the forest, helping the village elder with odd jobs. His parents noticed he seemed happier, more confident, but they attributed it to him finally growing out of his awkward phase. The bond between boy and dragon deepened with every meeting. Valdris shared his vast knowledge through their mental link, teaching Marcus about the true history of the world. He learned that magic hadn't disappeared. It had merely hidden itself, flowing underground like a river, waiting for those who knew how to find it. Magic requires belief, Valdris explained one afternoon as Marcus sat beside him, organizing ancient scrolls from the dragon's collection. When humans stopped believing, they stopped seeing, but the magic never left. It simply became invisible to those who chose not to look. Marcus discovered he had a natural talent for the old arts. Under Valdris's guidance, he learned to sense the flow of energy through living things, to understand the language of wind and stone, to see the connections between all things. It was like learning to use a part of himself that had always been there, but never awakened. The dragon, in turn, found himself experiencing the world anew through Marcus's young eyes. The boy's enthusiasm was infectious. Simple things that Valdris had long taken for granted. The way sunlight created rainbows and ice crystals, the intricate patterns of frost on cave walls, the music of mountain streams, became sources of wonder again. One day, about 3 months after their first meeting, Marcus arrived at the cave to find Valdris standing. The dragon had been too weak to rise for decades, but now he stood tall, his head nearly touching the cave ceiling. His scales caught the light, creating patterns of green fire across the walls. "You're better," Marcus exclaimed, his joy radiating through their bond. "Thanks to you," Valdris replied, lowering his great head to nuzzle the boy gently. "Your faith has rekindled something I thought forever lost. But, Marcus, we need to talk about what comes next." The dragon's tone was serious, and Marcus felt a flutter of worry. What do you mean? I'm growing stronger, yes, but I'm still the last dragon. One day, despite our bond, I will fade. Dragons were not meant to be solitary creatures. We need our own kind, just as humans need other humans. Valdris's mental voice carried deep sadness. I would not burden you with the grief of watching me slowly diminish over the years. Marcus shook his head firmly. No, we'll find a way. There has to be a way. Dear child, Valdris said gently, some things cannot be changed. The other dragons are gone. I searched for centuries before retreating to this cave. If any survived, they are hidden beyond even my ability to find. But Marcus had inherited more than just magical ability from his grandmother's bloodline. He had also inherited her stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. Over the following weeks, he dove into the ancient texts in Valdris's collection with renewed determination. He read about dragon magic, about the bonds between species, about the nature of life itself. It was in a crumbling tome written in a language that predated any human civilization that Marcus found what he was looking for. The text spoke of the eternal flames, sacred dragon sites where the essence of dragonkind was strongest. These places were repositories of ancestral memory and power, where dragons had performed their most sacred rituals. This is it, Marcus exclaimed, showing the passage to Valdris. It says here that dragon eggs could be blessed at these sites, ensuring the hatchlings would carry the full heritage of their kind. But, more importantly, it mentions something about the flames being able to call to any dragon, no matter how far away or how well hidden. Valdris studied the text, his ancient eyes widening. The eternal flames. I had forgotten. It has been over 1,000 years since any dragon visited such a site. We believe them all extinguished when the great temples fell. But what if they're not? Marcus pressed. What if they're just hidden, like you were? Like magic is? Hope, that dangerous and wonderful thing, stirred again in Valdris's heart. The nearest eternal flame was on Mount Ethermore, a week's flight to the north. But, Marcus, even if it still exists, I am not strong enough for such a journey. And you certainly cannot make it on foot. Marcus grinned, and Valdris recognized the expression. It was the look the boy got when he was about to suggest something outrageous. So we practice. You build up your strength. And when you're ready, we fly together. Fly together? Valdris repeated, astonished. Marcus, I haven't carried a rider in 2,000 years. And you're just a boy. I'm your bonded partner. Marcus corrected with a confidence that belied his years. And, according to these texts, that makes me a dragon rider, even if I'm a first in a millennium. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Valdris had thought the age of dragon riders had ended forever. The bonds between dragon and human had once been the stuff of legend. Partnerships that had shaped the world, maintained the balance between magic and mundane, and created wonders beyond imagining. They began preparing immediately. Valdris started with short flights around the mountain, rebuilding muscles that had been dormant for decades. Marcus, meanwhile, studied everything he could about the ancient dragon riders. He learned about balance, about reading wind currents, about the mental connection needed to fly as one being rather than two. The village began to notice changes in their strange, bookish boy. Marcus moved with a new grace, his reflexes sharper than they should be. He seemed to know things before they happened. When storms would come, where to find lost sheep, which herbs would cure winter ailments. Some of the older villagers exchanged knowing looks, but said nothing. Mountain folk had long memories, and a few remembered stories their own grandparents had told. After 6 weeks of preparation, Valdris declared himself ready. He was still not at his full strength. That would take years to fully return, but he was strong enough for the journey. On a clear morning when the mountain peaks glowed pink with dawn light, Marcus climbed onto Valdris's back for the first time. The dragon's scales were warm beneath him, and Marcus found handholds as if they had been designed for him. Perhaps they had been. Dragons and riders had evolved together over millennia. The moment he settled into position at the base of Valdris's neck, Marcus felt their bond strengthen, becoming something more than mental communication. He could feel the dragon's heartbeat, sense the power in his wings, share his perception of wind and sky. "Are you ready, young rider?" Valdris asked, and Marcus could hear both excitement and concern in his voice. "I've been ready my whole life," Marcus replied. "I just didn't know it until I met you." With a powerful leap and a thunderous beat of wings, Valdris launched them into the sky. Marcus's stomach dropped as the ground fell away, but the fear was immediately replaced by pure exhilaration. They were flying, truly flying. The wind rushed past them, cold and clean, carrying the scent of pine and snow. Below, the world spread out like a map, forests and rivers and distant villages all connected in ways Marcus had never imagined. Through their bond, he felt Valdris's joy at being airborne again, the dragon's natural element. This was what they were meant to do, what dragons were born for. The great wings beat steadily, finding currents of warm air to ride, climbing higher until the mountains looked small beneath them. They flew north, following ancient paths that Valdris remembered from centuries past. The landscape had changed. Forests had grown where once were fields, rivers had altered their courses, human settlements had appeared and vanished, but the bones of the earth remained the same. As they flew, Valdris shared more memories through their bond. Marcus saw the world as it had been in the Age of Dragons, when great cities of stone and magic had dotted the landscape, when dragons and humans had worked together to create wonders. He saw the decline too, the fear and mistrust that had grown, the wars that had torn the two races apart. "We lost our way," Valdris said sadly. "Both dragons and humans. We forgot that we were stronger together than apart." "Then, we'll remind them," Marcus said with fierce determination. Starting with finding the eternal flame, they flew for 3 days, camping in hidden valleys at night. Marcus discovered that the bond allowed him to help warm Valdris's body, sharing his own life energy to ease the strain of long flight. It was symbiotic. The dragon's magic enhanced the boy's abilities, while the boy's youth and vigor helped restore the dragon's strength. On the morning of the 4th day, they saw Mount Ethermore rising from a sea of clouds. It was a perfect cone, its peak white with eternal snow, its slopes covered in forests that had never known an axe. Even from distance, Marcus could sense something different about it, a thrumming in the air, a sense of presence that made his skin tingle. "I feel it," he whispered. "The magic. It's everywhere here." The eternal flames were placed in locations where the magic runs strongest, Valdris explained. Mountains that touch the sky, where the barrier between worlds grows thin. "But, Marcus, I see no sign of the temple that once stood here. It may truly be gone." They circled the mountain, searching. The ancient texts had described a temple of white stone carved into the living rock of the mountain, with great braziers that burned with flames of every color. But all they could see was unbroken forest and stone. It was Marcus who spotted it, a pattern in the trees that didn't quite look natural, a regularity that suggested design rather than chance. "There," he pointed. "The forest is growing over something." Valdris landed in a clearing that shouldn't have existed, perfectly circular and carpeted with grass that grew in a spiral pattern. The moment his claws touched the ground, symbols began to glow beneath the grass, ancient draconic runes that had been hidden for centuries. "The concealment spell," Valdris breathed. "It's still active after all this time. The temple isn't gone, it's hidden." Working together, dragon and boy began to unweave the spell. It was complex magic designed to last millennia, but it recognized Valdris as dragon kind and Marcus as a bonded rider. Layer by layer, the concealment fell away, revealing the truth beneath. The temple materialized like a dream, becoming real. White stone columns rose from the earth, carved with histories of dragonkind. Archways opened into halls that defied geometry, being larger inside than outside. And at the center, in a courtyard open to the sky, stood a brazier the size of a small house. It was empty, filled only with cold ashes. But as they approached, Marcus felt the potential within it, like a held breath waiting to be released. The eternal flame is extinguished, Valdris said heavily. We are too late. No, Marcus said, approaching the brazier. It's not gone. It's just sleeping. He could feel it through his enhanced senses, the tiniest spark buried deep in the ashes, maintained by the temple's ancient magic, waiting for someone to rekindle it. He looked up at Valdris. You need to breathe fire into it. Dragon fire to awaken dragon flame. Valdris shook his great head. I haven't breathed fire in 500 years. I'm not sure I remember how. You do, Marcus said with absolute certainty. It's part of who you are. Just like flying. Your body remembers, even if your mind has forgotten. The dragon looked at his young partner, drawing strength from the boy's unwavering faith. He reached deep within himself, to the core of his being where his fire had always lived. It was there, buried under centuries of disuse and despair, but still present. The bond with Marcus had rekindled more than just his will to live. It had begun to restore all aspects of his dragon nature. With a deep breath that seemed to draw on the magic of the mountain itself, Valdris exhaled. A stream of emerald flame, tinged with gold at the edges, poured from his jaws into the ancient brazier. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ashes began to glow. The spark that had waited so long caught the dragon fire and exploded into life. Flames of every color imaginable erupted from the brazier, reaching toward the sky in a pillar of light that could probably be seen for miles. The temple thrummed with renewed power, and the symbols on the walls blazed with their own inner fire. But something else happened that neither of them expected. The flames began to pulse, sending out waves of energy that rippled across the sky like signals. Dragon magic calling to dragon magic, reaching out across impossible distances to any of the bloodline who might still draw breath. Valdris gasped. It's a beacon. The eternal flames weren't just ritual sites, they were gathering calls. When lit by a true dragon, they summoned any others who still live. They waited, hardly daring to hope. Minutes passed, then an hour. The flames continued to burn, their call echoing across the world, but no answer came. Marcus took Valdris's great clawed foot in his small hands, offering what comfort he could. Then, just as the sun began to set, Valdris stiffened. Do you feel that? Marcus stretched out his senses, using abilities he was still learning to control. There, at the very edge of perception, he felt it too. A presence, ancient and powerful, approaching from the east. Then, another from the south, and another from the west. Dragons, Valdris whispered, his voice filled with awe. They're answering the call. The first to appear was a dragon the color of storm clouds, smaller than Valdris, but moving with deadly grace. She circled the temple warily before landing at the edge of the courtyard, her silver eyes fixed on Valdris with a mixture of suspicion and hope. I thought I was the last, she said, her mental voice carrying the music of wind chimes. I have hidden in the depths of the ocean for 3 centuries, certain that dragonkind was extinct. Before Valdris could respond, 2 more dragons arrived. One was the deep red of rubies, with horns that curved like scimitars. The other was white as fresh snow, with eyes like blue stars. They landed cautiously, as if afraid this might all be a dream. Over the next hour, more came. Some were ancient, like Valdris. Others were younger, having lived their entire lives in hiding. A few were barely more than hatchlings, raised in secret by parents who had feared to let them fly free. In total, 17 dragons answered the call of the eternal flame. They gathered in the temple courtyard, voices rising in a mixture of languages as they shared their stories. All had thought themselves alone or a part of tiny isolated groups. All had hidden from a world they believed had no place for them. The joy of reunion was tempered by grief for all those who were truly gone. But hope, real, tangible hope, began to take root. It was the white dragon who first noticed Marcus. Valdris, she said carefully, there's a human child standing beside you. This is Marcus, Valdris said proudly. My bonded partner. He is the reason we are all here. Without him, I would have faded into the final sleep, and the eternal flames would have remained dark forever. The gathered dragons looked at Marcus with expressions ranging from curiosity to wariness. A human who could bond with a dragon? Who could see through concealment spells and sense ancient magic? It had been so long since such things were possible. Marcus stepped forward, feeling very small among so many massive creatures, but not afraid. The bond with Valdris gave him courage. "I know humans have given you reason to hide," he said, his young voice carrying clearly in the sacred space. "But not all of us have forgotten the old ways. There are others like me, carrying the blood of the ancient riders. We just need to find each other, the way you found each other." The ruby-red dragon lowered his great head to study Marcus more closely. "You truly bear the old blood. I can smell it on you, see it in your aura. But one human does not change the world, young rider." "No," Marcus agreed. "But one human and one dragon started this. Look what that led to." He gestured at the assembled dragons. "A week ago, each of you thought you were alone. Now you know you're not. Maybe there are more humans out there who are ready to remember, to believe again. Maybe the world is more ready for magic to return than we think." An ancient dragon, the color of copper, spoke up. "The child speaks wisdom. We have hidden for so long, we forgot to look for signs that times might have changed. If humans like this one exist, perhaps there's hope for the old alliances to be renewed." The discussion continued long into the night. Dragons shared information about safe havens, about others who might still be in hiding, about the state of the world as each had observed it. Plans began to form, cautious plans, but plans nonetheless. They would start small, seeking out humans who carried the old blood, building trust slowly. As the moon rose full and bright above the temple, Valdris stood with Marcus beside him. Around them, dragons who had thought themselves the last of their kind made new connections, kindled new friendships, began to envision a future that had seemed impossible. "Thank you," Valdris said softly to his young partner. "You gave me back my life, and now you've given my people back their future." Marcus leaned against the dragon's warm side. "We did it together. That's what partners do." The eternal flame burned on, its light a beacon not just for dragons, but for hope itself. The world was changing. Magic was stirring. And at the heart of it all was the bond between one ancient dragon who had found a reason to live and one young boy who had never stopped believing in wonder. 6 months had passed since the rekindling of the eternal flame. The world was beginning to change in ways both subtle and profound. Marcus had grown taller, his shoulders broader, and his eyes held a wisdom beyond his 13 years. The bond with Valdris had accelerated his maturation, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. He moved with the fluid grace of someone comfortable in their own skin, and his presence carried a quiet authority that made even adults listen when he spoke. The dragons had not returned to the world in a grand revelation. Instead, they chose the path of gradual emergence. Small groups established hidden sanctuaries where they could live freely while remaining concealed from the broader human population. They sought out humans who showed signs of magical sensitivity, building bridges one relationship at a time. Marcus had become something of an ambassador between the two worlds. With Valdris, he traveled to human settlements where old bloodlines ran strong, seeking those who might be ready to accept the truth about dragons. They found them in unexpected places: a librarian in Prague whose dreams were filled with flying, a farmer in Japan who could make plants grow with a touch, a street artist in New York whose paintings seemed to move when no one was watching. The sanctuary they established in the mountains near Thornhaven had become a center of learning. The White Dragon, whose name was Lyralii, proved to be a gifted teacher. She worked with the young humans who came to learn, helping them discover abilities they never knew they possessed. The ruby-red dragon, Scorius, turned out to have a talent for healing, and soon people with illnesses that modern medicine couldn't cure began to find their way to the sanctuary, guided by whispers and rumors. But not everything was progressing smoothly. Word of strange happenings in the mountains had reached the outside world. Hikers reported glimpsing massive shapes in the sky. Satellite images showed heat signatures too large to be any known animal. And in the halls of power, people who had built their careers on the absence of magic began to take notice. It was on a crisp autumn morning when Marcus sensed something wrong. He was in the sanctuary's main hall, helping a new arrival, a young woman from India whose dreams had led her there, when he felt Valdris's alarm through their bond. Danger approaches. The dragon's mental voice carried urgency. Military vehicles on the mountain road. Many of them. Marcus's blood ran cold. They had known this day might come, but he had hoped for more time. The sanctuary held 32 humans and 8 dragons, including several younglings. If the military had found them, he ran outside to find dragons already taking defensive positions. Valdris stood at the entrance to the valley, his emerald scales gleaming in the morning sun, no longer hiding his true nature. The time for secrecy had passed. The military convoy stopped just outside the valley's entrance. Soldiers in full combat gear deployed, weapons aimed at the assembled dragons. Helicopters circled overhead, their cameras undoubtedly broadcasting footage to command centers far away. After centuries of hiding, dragons were about to be revealed to the world in the worst possible way. A voice amplified by loudspeakers echoed across the valley. By order of the Global Security Council, all inhabitants of this area are commanded to surrender immediately. Any resistance will be met with force. Marcus felt rage building in Valdris and the other dragons. These humans came with weapons to a place of peace, threatening children of both species. The dragon's instinct was to respond with fire and fury, to protect their sanctuary with all their ancient might. "Wait," Marcus said, both aloud and through the mental link he now shared with all the dragons present. "If we fight, we prove their fears right. We become the monsters they expect. They come with weapons to our home." Scorius snarled, smoke rising from his nostrils. "They threaten our young, and if we respond with violence, we lose any chance of coexistence," Marcus replied. He turned to Valdris. "There's another way. Let me speak to them." "Marcus, no," Valdris said immediately. "It's too dangerous." "I'm the bridge," Marcus said firmly. "This is why our bond exists, to show them that humans and dragons can work together. Trust me." Before anyone could stop him, Marcus walked toward the military line. He was terrifyingly exposed, a 13-year-old boy walking toward hundreds of armed soldiers. But he walked with his head high, and something in his bearing made the soldiers hesitate. He stopped halfway between the two groups and spoke, his voice carrying clearly despite its youth. "My name is Marcus Chun. I am a dragon rider, bonded to Valdris of the Thorns Pike Mountains. I speak for both human and dragon kind in this place." The loudspeaker crackled again. "Return to your position immediately. You are in violation of numerous international laws." "What laws?" Marcus challenged. "Laws against learning? Laws against healing? Laws against two species choosing to live in harmony? Look around you. Do you see a threat here? Or do you see something that challenges everything you thought you knew about the world?" He spread his arms wide. "Yes, dragons are real. They never left. They just hid because humanity forgot how to share the world. But some of us remember. Some of us carry the old blood that allows us to bond with them, to bridge our worlds. We're not your enemy. We're your future." A stir ran through the military ranks. Some soldiers lowered their weapons slightly, uncertainty clear in their body language. The helicopters continued to circle, broadcasting this impossible scene to the world. Then, in a move that no one expected, Marcus began to glow. The months of bond sharing with Valdris had awakened his own magical nature, and now it manifested visibly. Soft golden light emanated from his skin, and his eyes held flecks of emerald fire. He was human, but he was also something more, evolution's answer to a world where magic was returning. "You came here with weapons," Marcus continued, his voice carrying new power. "But weapons won't work against what's happening. Magic is returning to the world. It's in your cities, your towns, your homes. Children are being born with abilities that science can't explain. The old bloodlines are awakening. You can try to fight it, or you can embrace it. Behind him, Valdris moved forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the boy. But instead of threatening, the dragon lowered his great head in a protective gesture that spoke of partnership, not dominance. One by one, the other dragons emerged from their positions, not in attack formation, but simply standing with dignity and grace. The human refugees of the sanctuary emerged too, men, women, and children who had found their way there because they didn't fit in a normal world. Some glowed with their own inner light. Others showed their gifts in different ways. One woman floated a few inches off the ground. A man held fire in his palm without being burned. A child spoke to the birds that landed fearlessly on her shoulders. "This is not a threat," Marcus said. "This is an opportunity." For thousands of years, humans and dragons shaped the world together. We can do so again, but better this time. We've learned from our mistakes. We don't want to rule or be ruled. We want to share, to teach, to heal. The military commander emerged from one of the vehicles. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, someone who had seen too much of the world's conflicts. He walked forward slowly, weapon holstered, until he stood facing Marcus. "You're asking us to accept the impossible," he said. "I'm asking you to accept the inevitable," Marcus replied. "Magic is returning whether you accept it or not. The only choice is how humanity responds, with fear and violence, or with wisdom and wonder." The commander looked past Marcus to Valdris. "And if we lower our weapons, what guarantee do we have that these dragons won't simply destroy us?" It was Valdris who answered, his mental voice reaching out to touch the commander's mind gently, carefully. The man staggered slightly at the contact, but didn't retreat. "We have hidden for centuries," Valdris said. "If we meant humanity harm, would we have revealed ourselves this way? Would we have allowed a child to stand between us? We dragons have long memories. We remember the wars, the betrayals, the fear. But we also remember the partnerships, the great works we accomplished together, the balance we maintained. That is what we seek again." The commander was silent for a long moment. Around them, the world held its breath. Soldiers waited for orders. Dragons waited for threats. The refugees waited for their fate to be decided. Then, in a move that would be remembered in history books, the commander slowly removed his weapon belt and let it fall to the ground. "Stand down," he ordered. "All units, stand down." There was confusion in the ranks, but military discipline held. Weapons were lowered, though not abandoned. The commander stepped forward until he was close enough to touch Marcus. "My grandmother used to tell stories," he said quietly, "about dragons and magic and a world that was bigger than what we could see. I thought they were just fairy tales." He looked at Valdris, then back at Marcus. "What happens now?" "Now we talk," Marcus said, relief flooding through him. "We learn about each other. We find a way forward that works for everyone." What followed was the most extraordinary negotiation in human history. It took place right there in the valley, with dragons and humans sitting together for the first time in centuries. The military commander, whose name was General Harrison, proved to be more open-minded than his initial approach had suggested. He had been sent to investigate a potential threat, but what he found was a potential hope. Over the next hours, which stretched into days, frameworks were established. The sanctuary would be recognized as a sovereign space, a place where dragons and humans could coexist and learn from each other. In return, the dragons agreed to share their knowledge, particularly in healing and environmental restoration. Magical humans would be registered not for control, but for support and training. The world watched through news footage and social media as the impossible became possible. There was fear, certainly. Some called for the dragons to be destroyed, viewing them as a threat to human dominance. But there were also millions who watched with wonder, who remembered their childhood dreams of magic and realized those dreams might not have been fantasies after all. Children around the world began to display magical abilities more openly, no longer hiding in fear. Scientists scrambled to understand phenomena that broke their careful models of reality. Environmentalists celebrated as dragon magic began to heal damaged ecosystems with a speed and thoroughness technology couldn't match. Marcus stood at the center of it all, a bridge between worlds. He divided his time between the sanctuary and the outside world, teaching and learning in equal measure. Under Valdris's guidance, he helped establish the first Dragon Rider Academy, where humans with the old blood could learn to bond with dragon partners. But perhaps the most profound change was in Valdris himself. The ancient dragon who had been ready to die had become a leader of the new age. His wisdom, tempered by millennia of experience and loss, helped guide both species through the challenges of reunification. He worked closely with human leaders who were willing to listen, and slowly, carefully, the world began to accept that it was larger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. One evening, a year after the confrontation at the sanctuary, Marcus and Valdris sat on their favorite ledge overlooking the valley. Below them, dragons and humans worked together, building something new. Children played in the meadows, their laughter mixing human and dragon voices. The sight would have been impossible just 2 years ago. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked. The end of hiding, I mean. It was simpler when the world didn't know. Valdris considered the question, watching a young dragon teaching a human child to sense the flow of magic. Simply yes, but not better. We hid out of fear, fear of being hunted, fear of being rejected, fear of a world that had no place for us. But hiding was just another form of dying. He turned his great head to look at his young partner. You saved me, Marcus, not just from death, but from despair. You showed me that the world could still surprise an old dragon, that wonder and hope weren't just memories, but possibilities. We saved each other, Marcus corrected. I was just a weird kid who didn't fit in anywhere until I found you. And now? Marcus smiled, leaning against the warm scales of his dearest friend. Now we're building a world where no one has to hide who they are, where magic and technology can work together, where dragons and humans can be partners again. In the distance, more dragons appeared on the horizon, new arrivals who had heard that it was safe to come home. The eternal flames burned at multiple sites now, beacons of hope calling to any who still hid in shadow. The transformation wasn't complete. There were still conflicts, still those who resisted change. Some dragons found it hard to trust after centuries of fear. Some humans couldn't accept a world where they weren't the only intelligent species. But progress was being made, one connection at a time. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus felt a deep contentment through his bond with Valdris. They had done more than save one ancient dragon from despair. They had opened a door between worlds, proving that the age of magic hadn't ended. It had just been waiting for someone brave enough to believe. What do you think comes next? Marcus asked. Valdris rumbled with what Marcus had learned was dragon laughter. My dear young friend, I have lived for 3,000 years, and the one thing I've learned is that the future always holds surprises. But whatever comes, we'll face it together. Dragon and rider, magic and humanity working as one. Marcus nodded, his hand resting on Valdris's scales. Together, they watched the stars emerge, each one a point of light in a vast darkness. Like the dragons emerging from hiding, like the magic returning to the world, like the hope growing in hearts that had forgotten how to dream. The oldest dragon had indeed drawn what he thought would be his final breath. But a human boy's touch had changed destiny, not just for one dragon, but for 2 species and the world they shared. It was, Marcus thought, a pretty good beginning to what promised to be an extraordinary story. In the sanctuary below, dragon song began to rise, an ancient melody that hadn't been heard for centuries, now joined by human voices learning the harmonies. It was a song of reunion, of hope, of a future being written by those brave enough to reach across the divide of fear and touch the hand of friendship. The age of hiding was over. The age of partnership had begun. And somewhere in the world, another child with the old blood in their veins looked up at the sky and dreamed of flying, knowing now that dreams could become reality.